This video is brought to you by our amazing supporters over at Patreon.
Hey everyone, it's Ben from Board to Bits, and in this video we're going to be logging into our database so that we can access a player's information and start using it in our game. In this case, we're going to first go into our main menu script again, because in here we are going to change, or we're going to add a new method that we can go to our login page, much like we did with our registration page. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste this because we're going to use mostly the same information. We can change this from go to register to go to login, and we're just going to change load scene to 2. On our login button, we can say once it's clicked, we can add our canvas and then go to the main menu method, our main menu component, and get go to login as the method to call. We'll save that here, and now we can jump into our login menu. Login menu looks a lot like the register menu. It's just simply going to call a different PHP page, which is going to run slightly different code. So we're going to create a new C# script here. We're just going to call this one login, and we're going to add this to our canvas here in the login menu. I'll save that, and we'll quickly open this up in Visual Studio. We'll reload all. Now, a lot of what we're going to be doing is very similar to what we did inside of register. So what we can do here is I'm actually going to specifically copy a few of the pieces from this. I'm going to copy the variables and the call register method here. I'm going to delete start and update in login and then paste them. I'm going to change call register to call login, and I'm going to change the register method call here to login. I do also need to make sure that I am using Unity engine.ui again so that we have access to these objects. And then I'm going to have another just an I enumerator called login here. I am also going to copy verify inputs, because again, we're going to make sure that we have at least the minimum number of characters before we can even try to log in. Otherwise, there's no real point. And we can actually take a little bit of this code as well. I'm going to take pretty much everything up to where we check what the results are, because that's going to change a little bit here. But I am going to take the form. I'm going to take this www request, however, we are going to update the URL, and I'm going to take the yield. So we'll copy all of that and paste that into our login method. In this case, instead of going to register.php, we're going to create a script called login.php. So we'll populate that there. And once we've yielded this, or once we've yielded and returned this time, now what we want to do is we want to actually look at the information we've gotten, and we've got to kind of double check. First, we can check again, were there no errors? And we can do this again by looking for 0. We're going to pass in, the first thing we're going to pass from our echoes is a 0 if everything has gone to plan. So we're going to say if www.text, if the first character of text is 0. And we can do this simply by checking the very first index, the 0 index of the text, because a string is just an array of characters. So we want to see, is that very first character a 0? If it is a 0, and again use single quotes here because this is a character and we're checking against a character. If it is a 0, then we know that everything has gone to plan. We have gotten the information successfully, the password checked out, it's passing us back the proper information, and so now we can actually proceed. So what we also want to do here, though, is now we need to start kind of interacting with our game. We need some way of saying, hey, we've successfully logged in, let's kind of establish somewhere that we've logged in. And for that, I want to create a static class that's sort of the database manager. It's kind of overlook all of these things and say, what is our state right now? So we're going to jump back to Unity. We're going to right-click and create a new C# script, and I'm going to call this DB Manager, and it's going to be managing all of our database interactions in a way. Reload. I'm going to make this a static class so that we can access it from anywhere. I'm going to delete the monobehavior inheritance, and we're going to delete start and update from here. And DB Manager is going to actually be pretty simple. It's just going to have a couple of things in here. We're going to have a public static string called username. Also going to have a public static int called score. And so basically, if username has something in it, it means we've successfully logged in. There's a username, that's who is logged in, and the score will reflect their score. And so we can also use this as a way to check, we can simply check, are we logged in? We can say public static bool logged in. With this, we'll use a getter. And what we will get is to return if username does not equal null. So if username is null, then we are not logged in. No one is logged in. Therefore, logged in would be false. If username has something in it, it is therefore true, it is not null. It is true. We are logged in. Lastly, I'm going to add a public static void log out, just as a means so that we can log out when we need to. And this is simply going to set the username back to null when we want to log out. Pretty simple. But now that we have all of this in here, we can go back to login. And we can start passing some of this information to our database manager. So we'll say dbman if we've gotten back a 0 as the very first character, meaning that we've successfully logged in, then username is actually just going to equal name field dot text, because remember, what we've typed in here is the same username that's in the database in this case, because we've successfully logged in. So therefore, we can use that here. For the score, we're going to say dbmanager.score equals, and here's where we're going to need to actually kind of convert this from the string. We're going to need to both split the information that in the string we've gotten back, and we're going to need to convert it into an integer. So we're going to say www.text.split, and we're going to again use that tab delimiting. And we're specifically going to get, once we've done this, we're going to specifically get the second index, the 1 index, from it, which is going to be the second, so the second chunk of information from the string we pass back is going to be the score. First chunk is the error code, second chunk is the score. And then we just need to make sure that we actually, right now, as you'll see here, we cannot convert this string into an int implicitly, so we do need to put all this in parentheses and say int.parse. And so we're parsing this from the string that it is into an integer, which can be stored in the score variable. Now this obviously only works if we know for sure that we're passing numbers in that second chunk of information, so we do need to make sure that our PHP code follows suit in that. We can't name this user, or we can't name this login rather, because login is already taken up here, so we are just going to say login player here, just to make sure that those are different. Okay. Lastly, if we didn't get 0 as the first chunk of information, meaning there's some error code there, then what we can do is say else debug.log user login failed error number, and then just pass all of the text that has been sent back, because in this case, similar to how we did with registration, we'll pass in the error code and some information about what went wrong. Okay, with all of that, our C# side is done here. I am going to quickly jump back to Unity to make sure that all of our code is hooked, or all of our properties here are hooked up. So I want the name field to take name input field. Password field again takes the password. Submit button takes our login button. And I also want to make sure that name input field, when we edit it, every single time we edit it, we check and verify the inputs. Same goes for the password field. Drag the canvas in, go to login, verify inputs. And then finally, for our login button, we will again drag the canvas in, but in this case, when we click the login button, we will call login. I'm also going to uncheck interactable again so that we make sure that we're not able to press this login button until we have a valid name and password in there, or at least one that meets the criteria of it. And then we'll check if it's a valid to any of the users in our database. So we'll save this, and now we can create our PHP code. Let me double check one more time here. We're just calling it login.php, simple enough. I'll go back to Sublime Text here, close out of this web test, and I'm going to create a new file and save it as login.php. Put in our PHP brackets. And similar to how the login menu had some very similar code to our register menu, our login code is actually, our PHP code is going to be fairly similar with a few kind of key differences. So as for our what we can use from here, we can again use the same connection information, and we can actually use the same information to get the name and the password because we're using that same sort of form structure. So we can do all of that again and pass this in here. So checking all of that, and we can use the same error code for that information there. Next thing we can do here is we can check, again, if the name exists in our code. So we're going to also copy from our register page to check if the name exists. We'll copy all of this here and paste it in. Checking if the name exists, and again, if the query itself failed, we can just say that the name check query failed. So last time, we wanted to make sure that there were no entries that matched the username of the person that is logging in. In this case, we want to make sure that there is only one. If there are 0, that means no one has registered with that name, and therefore we can't log you in, you don't have an account. If there's more than one, something has gone wrong in the process. We still probably want to, in that case, not let you log in because maybe there's something funny going on, and we want to check that out beforehand. So we're going to say here, if MySQL num rows, meaning we're checking the number of rows returned from our query, so we're going to put in again name check here. If it does not equal 1, meaning if it's 0 or if it's something higher than 1, either case, there is a problem there. Where did we leave off with our codes? Error code 4 was the last one we wrote, so in this case, we're going to echo 5, and then to follow the structure here, yeah, just we'll do either no user with name or more than 1. Error code number 5. Number of names matching does not equal 1. And if this is the case, we'll just exit right here and just print whatever that error was. Next, we need to check the password. This works a little bit differently than it did before, whereas when we registered, we actually took the password you wrote, converted it to, created a salt for it, hashed it, and then passed it into the database. In this case, what we need to do is we need to get that salt and hash from the database and then see if the password you passed in when encrypted with the same salt results in the same hash. If they both become the same thing, that means that you use the same password both at registration and login. Everything's good. If they come out differently, that means that that both of them are different, and therefore you didn't type in the right password. So here we're going to check out, get all this login information. So we're going to get login info from query. And how we're going to do this is we're actually, when we pull this initial username check, we're also going to pull all of the other information that is relevant at this time. We're going to pull out the salt and the hash from here as well. So we're going to get that information here, and now we can get it, now we're going to have a means of getting it from that query. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say login info equals MySQL fetch ASSOC, which is short for associative array, which are these arrays, kind of like how our post array, we can get the various pieces of information by using these labels. Same thing works with a associative array when we get it from the from the query, now we can do things like login info salt, and we'll get that salt information, or login info hash, and we'll get the hash information. So we'll convert that from our name check. And now we can actually kind of store these in some a little bit more convenient variables for us. So we'll say salt equals login info salt, and then hash equals login info hash. Actually, login info isn't the best name for this now that I think about it. It's really the existing info inside of the table. So I might call it something like existing info. I have to make sure I change all of these as well. Now, because our login info is actually going to be the information that was passed in up here. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say login hash equals, and now we're going to use that same crypt function that we used before, but we're now going to pass in the password that's currently being used. So we'll pass in password with the salt from our table. And then we can quickly check and see if the existing hash does not equal our login hash, meaning that the result of this does not equal what is stored in the table. Then in that case, we're going to echo 6 incorrect password. Code number 6. Password does not hash to match table. And again here, we'll simply exit if that is the case. Lastly, if this did not happen, then we can assume that we did log in successfully. We can actually return the information we want. So we're going to say echo 0, meaning everything went fine, no error codes. We're then going to use \t to do a tab to separate the information. And then we'll specifically get here now, we can say dot existing info, and we'll get our score. However, you may notice we haven't actually gotten it from here, so we do need to make sure we're adding it from here as well. When we say select and then each of these columns, that means we're getting all of that information when we do this query. So right now I'm not only going to get the username, salt, the hash, I'm also going to get that score at that same time. And that means that I have all of the information right now. Now this is actually okay again, because this is all happening on PHP on the server side. So as long as we don't get to this point, if at any point, like if there are too many usernames or if the password isn't correct, we're not going to pass back that score. It's just going to have kind of been brought out onto the PHP, but never quite reach the player in the Unity program. Only if it is the correct password will it actually be passed out back to the player. So now we can hit save here, and we can go back to Unity. Hit save, and we're not going to see quite as much happen at this point now because we do not have anything that is really announcing success in this case like we did before, where we would debug log it. We can actually add in a little bit though. What we can do is we can jump back to Visual Studio, and if we go to our main menu, we can create a start method here. We'll say void start. Oops. Autocomplete got a little overzealous there. And what we can do is we can tell that prompt that we have up at the top of our main menu that says if there's a player that is logged in, we can actually start using that. So we'll go in and we're going to also add the namespace of using Unity engine.ui, and we'll say public text player display. And we'll say here, if dbmanager.username, actually we can say if dbmanager.loggedin, meaning that there is a username, then what we'll do is we will have player display.text equal player, and then add dbmanager.username. So as long as we're logged in, that username will appear. Save that. We can actually also go into our login page here, and what we want to do, similar to how we did this in the registration page, in fact I might just copy it right from here, copy this load scene so that when we do successfully log in, we jump back to the main menu. Save that there. And so now we can go back to Unity, go to our main menu scene, hit play. We can log in. I can now say board 2 bits. My password was just password. Log in. Object reference is not set. Oh. That is just a good old-fashioned coding oversight. I need to assign my player display here. So I will assign the text there. And now we can do this once more. Login, board 2 bits. Now if I were to do something like password 1 and I hit login, you see that incorrect password appears because this does not match. However, as long as I say password and login, jumps back, and now the player is board 2 bits. So with that, we're now able to register new players as well as log in existing players into the game. Last thing we're going to do is be able to take the information of an existing player and modify it as, say, they earn points in our game. We can update that and say, hey, here's a new number of points, store that into the database. It's kind of stored in the cloud for us, and we can access that from anywhere. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.